Hello, everybody, and hopefully you should be able to see my screen now. So we should be good to go. All right. So as Jill mentioned, we're going to be talking about the OCI Annotation Import Utility. Before we actually get into showing you kind of the utility, what I'd like to do is just take a brief minute or two and just kind of explain what, because the Annotation Import Utility covers annotations, obviously, but it also can import applications as well as business entities. So I wanted to take a minute and discuss what annotations were and then how they relate to applications and then furthermore business entities. And then once we kind of, talk about that, kind of lay that foundation, then we'll move into the utility and how to use that. So if you can see my screen, I'm going to go over to, you can see at the top, kind of the tabs, dashboards, queries, manage, and admin. But if I go to manage, and the first option there is annotations. So you've probably seen this before. These are what you're looking at here these are annotations that come just out of the box when you do a brand new fresh install of OCI. You get just a core layer of annotations that you can choose to use or not use. It just depends if they're relevant for your specific environment. So what an annotation is that's probably a good place to start. An annotation, usually the way that I describe it, it's a named value pair. So if I always give a stupid example, like in my home, everybody has a refrigerator in their kitchen, obviously, but the refrigerator doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know that it's a refrigerator. So, but if I take a sticky note and I write refrigerator on it and I post that on the front door of the fridge, it's a way of putting a label on that appliance, and so now it knows what it is. It's a refrigerator, so it's a way of naming it. Annotations are very similar to that idea. For instance, I could have a storage array, and that storage array maybe lives in a data center in Houston, Texas. Okay. Now, if I were to ask that data center, or if I were to ask that storage array, where do you live? It doesn't know that. But if I put a label on it and say, you live in Houston, okay, then when I use OCI and I run a query against that, I could say, show me all of the storage arrays in my Houston data center. Okay, then I'll get a list of them. So it's a way I can use it to kind of filter the objects in my environment. So a location or a data center like that is a very common use of an annotation. There are other ones that you can see here. There's like a birthday annotation. That would be a data type. A birthday would be like when that device or that switch or that storage array or that hypervisor, when that was placed into service. What was its date of birth in the environment? The city, where it lives, the country, the other things like the host operating system, that say a host is running, those are all types of annotations. Other ones that get a little more interesting, if I go over to the second page of this, is tier. A tier is one that we use all the time, and a tier would be a way of defining. Let's say that I have different types of storage of disk. I have SSD, I have fiber channel disk, I have SAS or SATA disk, and they all have different performance characteristics. So I would assign a tier level annotation to my storage pool, and then when I carve out that pool and assign, say, volumes and internal volumes in that storage pool, they inherit whatever tier that is. And then I can use that for things like chargeback or showback. Of how much because different disks are going to have different cost associated with them for billing type purposes. Okay, so that's kind of just a really high level overview of just annotations. Let me make a couple of comments about applications and business entities. Okay, so now you're seeing my screen with a few different applications defined, Dynamics, Finance, Nautilus. Everybody knows what an application is. That's just like an application that you install and you're running on some type of host operating system or a virtual machine. So it's just the application that's running. So there's nothing really special about that. But what you can do with applications is you actually map them to something called business entities. Now this is where it gets a little interesting, because we have business entities, and there's 4 different levels of business entities, and you can kind of think about these as a hierarchy, if you will. And so what I mean by that is, so if you look at my screen, you've got tenant, line of business, business unit, and then a project. So typically what I suggest to people is for a minute, just kind of take off your technology hat or take off your IT hat and put on your business administrator hat, okay? And think about how your organization, your company, or your business is organized, kind of from a top-down approach, okay? So a tenant might be the name of your company. So, you know, here at NetApp, okay, so our tenant would be NetApp. But let's say where it gets interesting is, let's say that I was a service provider and I have multiple storage arrays, and what I do is I actually sell space, or I lease different customers space on my storage array. So I might have 3, 4, 10, 20, 30 different companies sharing space on my storage array, and I carve out different space for each different client I have, okay, and each one of them would be a different tenant. That would be one possible scenario. Another possible scenario of a tenant might be, let's say that I was a multinational company, and I had, I had my main headquarters in the U.S., but I also had regional offices around the world, and I might want to subdivide my company into regional divisions. Or let's say, you know, maybe there's spin-off companies or child companies or other companies that we had acquired. Okay, those could be seen as different tenants. So then I have line of business. A line of business might be an example of that. Let's say that I run an electric company or some type of utility, and so I might have a commercial division. I might have a homeowner division, and then an industrial division. I might have hydropower, like water power, or I might have solar. There's some kind of green energy, whether it's windmill or solar, that kind of thing. So those could be different lines of business. A business unit could be. That could be, let's say, like human resources or engineering, research and development. Could be sales and marketing. Those would be different business units within a line. And then a project could be a specific, let's say they're coming out with a new model of a new vehicle. Okay, that might be a specific project. Something that has a deliverable assigned to it. So all of these different objects within a business entity, they can be used kind of like a cafeteria plan. You can use all of them if you choose to. Okay, you could have a value for tenant, line of business, business unit, and project. Or let's say that in your specific environment, only business unit or line of business and business unit, maybe those are the only two that really make sense for you. So you can pick and choose the ones that you want. Okay, so now that we've covered kind of business entities and applications, what we actually do with them in OCI is we come and we map them together. So you take the application, like I'm going to say Dynamics here, and you can see I've mapped that to a business entity called accounting and then AR, or accounts receivable. Okay, so this is where they're different than normal annotations. I set up the business entity hierarchy, then I create the application, and then when I create a new application, okay, so I'm just going to call this, say, test app 1, and then I come down and I choose my business entity that I want to use with that application. And the benefit of this, what this does for you as a user of OCI, then I can answer questions like, what application is using the most, SSD capacity, or what's the growth rate of that application, or what business unit and what business owner is consuming the most storage, and what's the growth rate of that division within the company. Okay, and then when I start doing projections, and it's coming up for the new budget cycle, and I start thinking about questions. Well, I'm currently at 90% of my capacity utilization, and I need to think about, how much more storage do I need to purchase? How many more shelves do I need to buy, or what kind of shelves do I need to buy, to satisfy the growth demands, for these, the different divisions that are consuming the capacity. So that's how you can use these things. Hopefully that makes sense. And if there's any questions, feel free to either, pop in and ask a question, and I can try to answer those as well. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked a little bit about annotations, applications, business entities, let's move on to the utility. So the first question is, where do you get the annotation import utility? So if you go under admin, and I think it's under troubleshooting, yeah, under troubleshooting, and I go to advanced troubleshooting here, and then over on the actions tab, you can see there's, at the very bottom, there's this annotation import utility button. So if you click on that, that will download a zip file, and you can extract that, which I've already done, but that's where you get it. So just to refresh that, that's under admin, troubleshooting, advanced troubleshooting, and then actions. Okay. Now this is a little bit slightly older version of OCI, but it's in pretty much in all the versions. It's going to be, that's basically where you're going to find it. It might be slightly different in different places, but that's where you should find it. Okay. So what I've done in the file system is I extracted that right here, and I just created a directory called import on my C drive. And you're going to get these files. So there's a set of libraries here, and you've got the actual yeah, that's where I extracted it from. And there's a README file as well. Let me show you that. So this tells you the jar files that are available, and it gives you some documentation for how to use it as well. But this is something that you would have, but I'm gonna kind of walk through some of this so you'll see this. But there's a README file that you should pay attention to there. Okay. So to run the utility, okay, what I'm gonna do here is you execute it by specifying the JRE, the Java runtime environment, and then you pass it some parameters. So I'm calling Java, and I'm passing the jar file. That's with the -jar, and then I specify what jar file that I want to use. So that's the REST anno import utility.jar. And in the file system, that's what you see right here. Okay. And then I specify the user account, because I have to tell the utility what credentials I'm going to log into the OCI server with. So I have to authenticate against the OCI server. So I'm going to use the user account, which is the admin account, and then I specify the -p for the password, and so that's just the default admin123. And then I specify the actual server. So because I'm running, in this demo, I'm running everything locally. So I'm just specifying localhost. Now that could be localhost or the IP address of this server. Or if I was running it against a remote server, I would specify that, whatever that IP address is. Okay, and then I pass it the actual CSV, the comma-separated file that I want to use to import. Okay, and so I'm actually, you can see that's my path to it, the anno import. And the first one I'm going to do, I think, is the tier storage pool CSV. So let's go and look at that. Okay, So here is, and I've got these CSV files in a different directory. So this is the first one that we're going to run. Okay, so what this is going to do is, this is the format. In the first line here, I'm indicating the headers. Okay, so what, and there's nothing like before the first comma. That's where the object goes that I'm going to be, the object type that I'm going to be executing this against. So that's storage pool. So I'm going to be executing this command against storage pools. That's for the first comma in the header up here. Now the second comma, that represents the actual pool itself. So this is the object type, storage pool, and this one is the actual name or the identifier of the specific pool that I want to annotate. And this is the type of annotation that I'm going to be applying. I'm going to apply a tier type of annotation. And so what I'm going to apply is tier 1. So in essence, what's going to happen is we're going to execute the command against storage pools in the environment. And specifically, this is the storage pool that I'm going to run it against, and I'm going to apply this annotation value. Okay, so let's try it and see how it works. So I'm going to come back to my command window, and I'm just going to hit that. Okay, and you can see how it ran, how quickly it ran. And if I pay attention to my output down here, the second line down where you see the number 2, it says annotations assigned. There were 2 of them that were assigned. Okay, so we assigned it to pool 1. So let's come over to OCI and let's do a new query. And let's look at storage pool. And let's do a search for pool 1. Okay. Now, what we want to do, we're not seeing any tier here, so let's come over and turn on the tier column. Actually, let's go all the way down here and find tier. Turn that column on. Okay, and then you can see these bottom 2, this one and this one. You can see they both have a value of tier 1. Okay. Now, you may be wondering why there are 2 storage pools that have the same name. They both are called pool 1. And the reason for that is, if you notice, in this particular environment, these pools live on different storage arrays. So they are unique because they're on 2 completely separate arrays. So that's perfectly fine. So the other thing that I could do, let's go back to our CSV file here. Now, another thing that you can do is, let's say that you want to remove some annotations. That's why I've got these 2 other lines down here. So now I'm gonna comment out the first line and the second line, and I'm gonna open up the last 2. Now, what this is doing, I'm still gonna be operating on storage pools, and I'm still gonna be operating on pool 1 on both of those arrays, but I'm not going to assign a tier value to them. Okay, and I'm gonna save that. Now, when I run this command, what do you think will happen? All right, well, let's find out. Okay, it says annotations cleared. You notice that in the output, there were 2 annotations that were cleared. Now, let's come back. Notice the tier 1 over here. Let's refresh the screen. Let's refresh that. And you can see now, they don't say tier 1, they say tier 2. And that's going to be because that was the previous setting, and they're inheriting that from probably most likely in this environment from the node level. So that's where that's going to be coming from. But the point is that it cleared out the, if we do this, let's see if we can get rid of the annotation altogether. Okay. And now, that's probably because they're, let's see. Yeah. Okay, it's derived. So if, yep, you can tell that, this is not a great example, but if the annotation is defined at a higher level, say at the storage array, or actually at the node itself, it's going to trickle down. It's going to inherit down. So that's why it cleared out tier 1, but it's inheriting from the parent on down from tier 2. That's why you've got that. We'll see a better example here shortly. Let's go on to another one. Let's go on to cost model to internal volume. Okay. Let me. Okay. So let's look at this one. All right, so here in this one, I have an annotation called cost model. And let's see, cost model. Okay. So cost model is an annotation, and I had a customer a few months ago that actually I had never seen this used. I thought it was a good idea. But they actually define their internal volumes. They assign a cost model to them, whether it's an operating, whether they bill for it as a CapEx expense or an operating expense, and they assign an annotation, and that's how they do their billing. So I thought that might be an interesting one to demo. So what I'm doing here is I'm specifying the storage type. Instead of storage pool this time, we're specifying internal volume and a specific internal volume. So this is the actual storage array, and the internal volume, viz 2016-11. So that's that internal volume that lives on this array. And we're going to assign the cost model with a value of CapEx to this internal volume. All right, so let's see if we can make that work. So, all right, annotations assigned 1. So let me actually filter for that. So I'm going to copy that and go back to our queries. And we said that was an internal volume. So let's paste that in there and see if we can find that. Okay, so there's that internal volume, viz 2016-11. If we go to the landing page for that, and I can see the cost model, see that shows up right there right now, and it has a value of CapEx. Okay, now, yeah, this is interesting. See, this one, notice that this does not say derived. Remember on the last one, after we cleared out the tier 1 value, it said tier 2, and it had a little thing next to it, it said derived. That's because it was derived from the parent object. Now this one, because this was explicitly defined at this level, it doesn't say derived. That's the difference there. Okay. So let's go back and then we could, if we wanted to clear that out, we could either clear it out the same way we did before. We could remove this and rerun the script with that second line, or the other option, and this is what how most people will do this, is they would just come and they would select it right here, and they would come down to actions, and they would say remove annotation, and then they would specify the cost model, and they would delete that. Okay, and that would remove that annotation from that internal volume. All right, let's go on to, I think I've got another example here. Application, this entity to internal volume. Let's look at this one. Okay, so this gets a little more complicated. Not too bad though. So what we're going to do here is we have our 2 commas here, and so we're going to be operating on internal volume again, and then we have the internal volume name. So the internal volume is the actual storage array and the actual internal volume. And the application that we're going to be using is Microsoft Dynamics, MS Dynamics, and so that corresponds to application right here. So application is MS Dynamics. And then the line of business, so remember when we were talking about the mapping between applications and business entities. So that's what we're showing here. Then the line of business is accounting, and the business unit is accounts receivable. All right. So we're going to run that. Let's close application business entity to internal volume, and let's go back to that. Let me change the CSV file that we're using. Application business entity to internal volume. Yeah, okay, that's the right one. So let's run that guy. Okay, see it says applications assigned 1. All right, so let's go to that. And voila, notice what we have here. So there's the application, MS Dynamics, and there's my business entity that has been assigned. Now this is interesting. See, this says derived. Okay, so this is like a pop quiz. Why do you think it says derived right there? All right. Let's go back to, it says derived because when we go back, if we look at applications, and remember that the business entity, because we're assigning the application, they're mapped together. So when you assign the application, you actually inherit the business entity that is mapped to that application. So let me say it another way. In other words, I could have done, instead of doing it like this up here, I could have done the second one down here. I could have just said MS Dynamics, and because Dynamics is already mapped to the business entity, it would inherit that just transparently. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm commenting out these lines here. Let's do the first one too. I'm commenting out the first 3 lines there, and we're actually going to run these 2 lines here. All right, so let's save that. And let's go back to, where was, oh, wait, Viz, yeah, I wanted this one. All right. Let's remove that so that we can, all right. We're going to remove, okay. Oh, not yet. I'm going to remove the application Dynamics. Okay, and let's make sure there's not a business entity on there. No business, yeah. See, no business entities are available to remove. That's because it was already removed when we removed the application. So let's rerun that. Application to business entity. All right. Applications assigned. Okay, now let's go look at it. And notice what we have. We have MS Dynamics and we have the business entity, even though we did not explicitly define it in the CSV file. See, because this is how we ran it. We just specified MS Dynamics, but it brought in the accounting and the AR. And the reason why it brought those in is because the MS Dynamics is mapped to accounting and accounts receivable right here. Okay. The last comment, well, actually 2 more comments that I want to make. When you start working with the annotation import utility, the base annotation has to be defined in OCI, because when you run the CSV file, if the annotation isn't there, it's not going to be able to create it. Okay, it's just adding values to an annotation that already exists. Okay, so it has to be there. And the other thing, I've been doing just really simple examples with this, with just like one applying the annotation import just to one object in the OCI environment. But I've worked with customers where we had, they pulled all of their annotations like from a third-party system or like a CMDB, and they said, I've got 200 objects that I want to annotate. So what I did is I worked with the customer to actually build out this CSV file. I mean, and you can literally have hundreds and hundreds of lines of annotations that you want to apply in one CSV file, and it will run through those and just import them, all at once, and you can annotate your entire environment in like 5 minutes, or less. And so it's just a really, really nice and clean way to do that. But it takes a little bit of, understanding what you're doing, and it takes a little prep work, on the front end to make that work. But once you do that, it's a very powerful utility. So that is pretty much what I wanted to show today. Certainly any questions, I don't know, Jill, if any questions have come in over chat or anything, but if not, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, thanks, Aaron. I don't see anything in the chat, so we'll go ahead and let you guys go for the day. Thanks for joining. Again, it will be on the YouTube channel. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.